the mummification process, the bodies were buried underground or inside caves. Unfortunately, many of these mummies were stolen or looted by later grave robbers, though some have managed to survive. The Guanche mummy of Madrid is perhaps the best preserved of the Guanche mummies, as its careful embalming kept its organs intact and even preserved the man's hair. During his early 30s, was mummified between the 11th and 13th centuries AD, just a few centuries before the Spanish invaded the Canary Islands. New DNA evidence. In June 2019, it was announced that DNA studies had resolved many of the outstanding questions regarding the origins of the Guanches. Dr. Linus Girdland-Flink, a researcher at Liverpool John Moores University in the UK, who was part of the research team, stated, "Previous studies of the Guanches relied on single genetic markers, such as the mitochondrial DNA and the chromosomes. These markers often lack the analytical precision needed to resolve finer levels of population history. By sequencing autosomal DNA, we gained unique insights to the ancestry and origin of these populations." The researcher team generated the genome-wide sequence data and mitochondrial genomes from 11 Guanche individuals originating from archaeological sites in Gran Canaria and Tenerife. Leading author of this study, Dr. Ricardo Rodriguez Varela, a researcher at Stockholm University, explained the results of the team's fascinating study. By generating the first autosomal genetic data from these populations, we can conclusively demonstrate that the Guanches were most closely related to modern North Africans of Berber ancestry than to any other population we included for comparisons, supporting previous studies but adding more detail and nuance. The study was also able to show that the modern inhabitants of Gran Canaria inherited between 16 and 31% of their genomic ancestry from the Guanches. The Berbers spread throughout North Africa more than 3,000 years ago, occupying what is today the area from Libya to the Sahara. Rosa Friegel, a geneticist at La Laguna University, who took part in the research, said of the results, "Thanks to DNA analysis, we've been able to dispel the notion that the Guanches were practically Vikings, tall, blonde and blue-eyed. Everything indicates that they came from North Africa and were physically similar to the Berbers. Light skin with a tendency to an olive complexion and brown eyes that could be light-colored in some cases. Clichés and legends notwithstanding, the ancient inhabitants of the Canary Islands were not so different from today's." But the question is, if the original inhabitants of the Canary Islands came from North Africa, how and when did they arrive? Archaeologists believe that there were two major migrations, the first around 2,500 years ago, and the second one at around the 1st century AD, when North Africa was part of the Roman Empire. They are believed to have made the crossing in relatively small vessels, although no remains of these have ever been found. In February 2020, it was announced that the mummified remains of 72 individuals had been discovered by amateur archaeologists using a drone in a cave on Gran Canaria. Aroz Hima Gonzalez, who made the incredible discovery, said, "We were flying a drone and we took some pictures of the cave. It is in a very difficult place to access and you need to climb a cliff to reach the site. People thought the photos were fake because of all the bones there, but they were not fake, and the bones are believed to belong to Guanche mummified remains." Archaeologist Veronica Alberto and culture counsellor Javier Velasca confirmed the discovery, stating that the cave dates back to between the 8th and 10th centuries AD. A few years ago, newspapers all over the world carried the story that ancient history researcher Robert Sarmast has located the lost continent of Atlantis off the Mediterranean island of Cyprus. Sonar scanning apparently revealed man-made structures in the water around the island, 1 mile beneath sea level. Sarmast believed that the Mediterranean basin was flooded in 9000 BC, which submerged a rectangular landmass which he maintains was Atlantis. Although archaeologists at the time dismissed Sarmast's claims out of hand, new evidence evidence suggests there may indeed be an ancient city submerged in the waters around Cyprus. Almost every year, without fail, the headline "Atlantis Found" blares out from various newspapers all over the world. In fact, the range of hypothetical locations for Atlantis is staggering. The Minoan civilization of late Bronze Age Crete, supposedly destroyed by a colossal earthquake on the neighbouring island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1450 BC, was long thought to have been an indirect influence on Plato's Atlantis. However, research into late Bronze Age Crete has shown that the Minoan civilization continued to flourish long after the Theran quake. This vast array of wildly different theories has contributed to the skepticism of many researchers, who believe that Plato's Atlantis was merely a political allegory designed to glorify Athens as the perfect state fighting against a decadent and greedy Atlantean empire. For them, the story begins and ends with Plato. Solon never visited Egypt and heard the story from the priests at Sais. They reason that Plato located Atlantis out in the Atlantic beyond the Pillars of Hercules, because in his time this vast ocean represented the limit of the world known to the Greeks. Atlantis researchers, of course, would completely disagree with this conclusion. Indeed, one of them, Iranian-American architect Robert Sarmast, believes he knows exactly where Atlantis is. Did Robert Sarmast find Atlantis off Cyprus? Sarmast first hit the headlines in November 2004 when newspapers carried the story that after nearly 10 years of research using ocean mapping technology and accounts from ancient texts, he'd located Atlantis off Cyprus. Sarmast was quoted as saying, "This is going to rewrite the history books. We're set to make the biggest archaeological discovery of all time." He claimed that around 9000 BC, the Mediterranean basin was flooded in a deluge that submerged a rectangular man-made site which he believed was Atlantis. The lost civilization apparently lay around 5,000 feet below sea level, 50 miles or so off the southeastern coast of Cyprus. Sarmast and his team had carried out deep water sonar scanning, which indicated man-made structures on a submerged hill, including a wall almost 3 miles long, a walled hill summit and deep trenches. Sarmast's 6-day expedition cost about $200,000 and was partly funded by the Cypriot Tourist Organization. Sarmast was quoted at the time as saying of his discoveries, "It is a miracle we found these walls, as their location and lengths match exactly the description of the Acropolis of Atlantis provided by Plato in his writings. We cannot yet provide tangible proof in the form of bricks and mortar, as the artifacts are still buried under several meters of sediment, but the circumstantial and other evidence is irrefutable. My discovery will vindicate Plato." Within his dialogues, Plato provides factual clues as to what Atlantis was like. "I have matched all but 2 of the 45 clues with the area around Cyprus. That's either the biggest coincidence in the history of the world, or we have found Plato's Atlantis." Plato's account is so detailed that it is possible to make city plans based on his description. These match exactly the antediluvian maps of Cyprus as discovered through oceanographic mapping. Sarmast had in fact revealed his discoveries the year before he hit the newspaper headlines in a book entitled "Discovery of Atlantis: The Startling